What is going on, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, I wanted to take a look at the matchup between the BC Lions and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers ahead of a big matchup on Friday Night Football that will likely decide first place in the CFL's Western Division in 2023, and compare the teams based on their season so far and who I think has the edge going into this matchup. So before we get started, let's do a little bit of a rundown of how the seasons have gone for both of these teams so far. And so both of these teams have met twice this season. Both teams have won one game. So this last game on Friday night is going to decide the tiebreaker. And because these teams are currently tied in terms of overall record, this game is even more important for both of these teams to grab a victory here, because it will all but guarantee that they're going to be finishing first in the West Division and hosting the West Final and getting that valuable first round playoff bye. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Both games were blowouts the first couple times these two teams played, one each way. So it's going to be interesting to see if we finally get close game between these two teams this season. So really excited to see what happens in this game. It's worth noting that the first two games of this season series were in Winnipeg. This Friday's game is in Vancouver, so very much looking forward to it. So let's get started with all the information I have on the board here. So on the board, I have in the middle a comparison of the statistics, basically just basic statistics, points per game, points against per game, stuff like that. And then I also have, the remaining schedule for both of these teams, their home and away record, and then at the bottom I have some key matchups, which I think will decide who wins this game on Friday. So without further ado, we're going to start in the middle of the board here, and just break it down in terms of who has the edge in terms of these major statistics. So in terms of points per game, the BC Lions average 28 points per game, which is, of course, a pretty good mark, but they're beaten out by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who average 31.9 points per game. That is second in the CFL to the Toronto Argonauts, so Winnipeg has the edge there, and they also have the edge in terms of points against per game. Now, BC, for a long time this season, they had the best defense in the CFL, but it's kind of slipped a little bit over the second half of the season, and they've relinquished that title to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who average giving up 20.9 points against per game, whereas the BC Lions give up 22.3 points per game. So in terms of the basic points against and points for, Winnipeg has the edge in both of those categories, but what about yards? So passing offense, the BC Lions have an edge here, 297.9 passing yards per game. Vernon Adams has had an excellent season throwing the ball, consistently putting up 300, 400-yard games on a consistent basis. And then for Winnipeg, they average 275.4 yards per game through the air, and Collaros has had another excellent season and is the favorite right now for MOP. So BC has the edge there, but it's not a huge gap, and I think that, BC has been probably the most explosive passing offense in the CFL this season, so they have the edge there. Now, in terms of rushing offense, this is the biggest difference between these two teams. Winnipeg has the edge here, 136.6 rushing yards per game on offense, led by Brady Oliveira, who is having one of the great seasons by a Canadian or CFL running back that we've seen in quite some time. So I think he's been a driving force behind that number. And then on the other side, the BC Lions only average 84.3 rushing yards per game, which is second to last in the CFL. I believe only Saskatchewan averages less yards per game on the ground, and it's very close. So that is the biggest difference between these two teams. BC, a much more, air it out kind of team, whereas Winnipeg has a lot more balance on the offensive side of the ball. Something to keep in mind as we go into this matchup on Friday. Now, in terms of the defense, Winnipeg has the edge in terms of pass defense. 207 yards allowed per game. They've really put the clamps down after having a couple of bad games at the beginning of their season. Think back to their game, against Ottawa, some games that they've lost, like the game against Hamilton a few weeks back. But I think overall, the pass defense has been very good for Winnipeg this season, and the defense overall. And then on the other side, the BC Lions have a very good pass defense as well. Great secondary over there in Vancouver, allowing 224.7 yards per game through the air, which is a good number, but not as good as the number for Winnipeg. And then finally, in terms of rushing defense, this is where the Lions have the edge. 89.4 rushing yards allowed per game on the ground, whereas Winnipeg has allowed slightly more, 91.3 yards allowed per game on the ground. So in terms of those 6 basic team stats, it looks like Winnipeg has a bit of an edge in this matchup, but again, BC's proven that they could beat Winnipeg before, so the game on Friday's at home as well. So I think that at the end of the day, that's a bit of an equalizer, and we'll have to see what happens on Friday in this matchup. Now, looking at the remaining schedules for both of these teams, BC has a game at Hamilton, a team that beat them once before about a month ago, and then they're home against Calgary, a team that they've largely dominated in recent memory. So I think that's a manageable schedule for BC. The game against Hamilton could be challenging, but if they win on Friday, they'll only have to win one of these 2 matchups effectively to clinch the division. At home this season, they're 6-1. On the road, they're 5-3. And then for the Winnipeg side, their remaining schedule is home against Edmonton. That should be a win, as well as Edmonton has been playing this second half of the season here with Trey Ford under center. Then they're home against Calgary, and I really don't think Winnipeg's going to have trouble winning either of those games. So I think they shouldn't have a problem clinching first place in the West if they win the matchup on Friday. But like I said, a lot of it comes down to Friday night in Vancouver. So in terms of the key matchups for that game on Friday night, these are the ones that I'm looking for. So Vernon Adams versus the Winnipeg secondary. I think that, a big deciding factor in a lot of BC Lions games this season, or how close a lot of these games have been for BC, have been the turnovers by Vernon Adams Jr. I think if he can play within himself, make those calculated risks to make big plays still, but not turn the ball over, I think they have a really good chance of winning on Friday night. And then for the other side of the ball, Brady Oliveira, again, having a great season for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, running the football against that great BC running defense. I think that BC is one of the few teams that's capable of slowing down Oliveira and that good Winnipeg offensive line up front. So I think that is a key matchup to watch in this one. Oliveira, very key for Winnipeg's offense. Winnipeg, not the greatest short passing offense, so they rely on that running game to get those, 7-8 yard chunks to keep them, pacing down the field. So I think it's really important for Oliveira to get going once again in this one. I think the special teams will also play a big role in this one. I think Sergio Castillo has been a little bit shaky at times this season for Winnipeg, so I think Sean White, on the other hand, BC has been very, very effective for the most part this year. So I think, if it comes down to, a kick at the end of this game or during the middle of this game, I think that that could play a role in deciding a pretty close game here. And then the final matchup I'm watching is the Winnipeg offensive tackles Stanley Bryant and Jamarcus Hardrick against Mathieu Betts, who is arguably the most outstanding Canadian in the CFL this season, up there with Oliveira. That's a hell of a debate. But I think that Betts has had an excellent season, and he was a game wrecker in that first matchup against Winnipeg. So if he can have a great game again in this one at home, I think that BC will have a great chance of winning this game. But again, those Winnipeg offensive tackles, really talented players and some of the best players we have in the Canadian Football League. So those are just some matchups I'm watching, the team statistics, and a little bit about, the rest of the season for both of these teams. But ultimately, I'm going to leave it up to you guys in the comment section. Who do you think is going to win on Friday night? Who do you think ultimately finishes first in the CFL West Division in 2023? Would love to hear your thoughts. And with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great day, great weekend, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.